Hello, folks. This is our very first Guitars in the Classroom session where we're going to share the wisdom, knowledge, and expertise and humor and talent of the nation's top Guitar in the Classroom instructors. We're lucky today to be joined by Dr. Robert Phillips, who teaches guitar at the Harrison School for the Arts in Lakeland, Florida. And I'll let you do the rest of the introduction so you don't have to listen to me fumble around. So I need to know a little bit about your music background, your guitar background. When did you start playing? Did you major in college? What was your primary instrument if it wasn't guitar, etc.?
Yeah, guitar was my primary instrument in college. I've been playing guitar since I was 12 years old. By the time I was, I guess, a junior in high school, I knew I wanted to major in music, and I knew it had to be the guitar. So I got my degree in music education because I also knew I had to make a living. And yes, we all have to make a living, and that's it's funny. My younger self would probably not have given the advice that I give students now, which is make sure don't just get a degree in performance, because a degree in performance won't get you a job. So unless you are real sure of how you're going to turn that into a livelihood, it's probably not going to be the best way to keep you in music career-wise.
Yeah, good points.
You know, whereas getting a degree in music education or music, music therapy or music business, any of the degrees that have a practical side to them other than performing, it keeps you in music, and you're doing your music for your living, and it's very satisfying.
Yeah, keeps you in music is a great way of putting it. I used to tell my students that unless they could never see themselves doing anything else but music, do something else, for exactly the reason you're saying. Yeah, it's just a tough business. So your guitar program at Harrison, what grades, what levels, and tell me a little bit about how the program began, if you were the first teacher there or not.
Yeah, well, Harrison School for the Arts is a magnet arts high school, part of the public school system in Polk County Public Schools. It is a high school, so it's 9th through 12th grades. Admission to Harrison is by audition, and students are required to have to maintain a minimum of 2.3 cumulative average, weighted average, and that's from, when they apply, they better have that 2.3 before they even apply, because we won't accept their application otherwise, and they're required to maintain that average going on forward. The guitar program was supposed to start up originally in 2009, and for some reason it wound up being delayed a year. Probably had something to do with money. It almost always does. But in the meantime, they had just expanded the school, built 2 beautiful buildings that are just state of the art, and added a few departments. And when the guitar department was scheduled to be one of them, didn't happen in 2009. As I said, it happened a year later, and I was the first guitar instructor.
So guitar department, are there multiple teachers there now? Are there multiple levels and stuff?
There aren't. The guitar, it's a one-man department.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting structure to the program. The program was really put together by the principal, who was, by the time he hired me, he already had the courses lined up and what was going to be the sequence of courses that students would be expected to take as guitar majors. So he very much had in mind it was going to be a classical guitar program, which I think was a smart decision, because if you want to get involved in all-state guitar, which we have in Florida, if you want to do solo and ensemble, which we have in Florida, then you need to have that classical background. You've got to be able to function in that world, in that musical world. So the principal, Dr. Collins, put together this program, and students come in typically, in 9th grade, and they have two guitar classes a day. One is an instrumental tech class, and the other is a guitar class. The instrumental tech class is technique. You know, we work on.
I'm sorry, two 1-hour classes a day or 45-minute sessions a day?
Yes, two
That's fantastic.
50-minute sessions a day
Oh.
on guitar in freshman year. Sophomore year, they only get one. They don't have an instrumental tech class, but that's because they need to make room for a music theory class. And they have a music theory class, and that class takes them all the way up to, you know, where they are doing 4-part writing. They're using secondary dominants and things like that. So it takes them to a pretty high level. They're almost ready to take the AP exam by the time they finish that that year of music theory. Then the following year after that, they have an instrumental tech class again and their guitar class. So they have their 50 minutes a day, and they have a music elective, which is usually AP music theory. That's the most typical.
Yeah.
And then in their fourth year, they have their instrumental tech, their guitar class, and an elective, which is often composition. They also they also have to have a semester of keyboard in there.
How many students? Okay, I mean, I taught guitar for a long time, and I had nothing like that at all. And it was the 70s and 80s, the Wild West of guitar. I mean, there weren't any programs, and my principal wouldn't know a guitar from a saxophone. But I'm really curious. So in the tech class, do they do scales or arpeggios? And is it more like a private lesson, or do you follow the Bill Leavitt series, or what?
Yeah, it's a group class. The way I handle it is different days we work on different things. One of the things is in Instrumental Tech 1, the freshmen are in there learning how to play 2-octave scales, because at that point, they, you know, in middle school, they've theoretically learned how to play their 1-octave scales. Being able to play a scale is part of the audition, and again, it's typically 1 octave, 1 position. So at this point, you know, I'm teaching them how to do their 2-octave Segovia scales.
Segovia scales. That phrase will never die.
Right. It never. And actually, I use the old scale book that the Royal Conservatory had published that had all of the major and minor scales and arpeggios, and it was a wonderful book. The 2 and 3 octave scales were like the Segovia scales very much, but it also included the harmonic minor, not just the melodic. And I liked that, and I just felt it was a more thorough book, to be perfectly honest. So that's the book that we're using. So the kids get every key, you know, all 12 major minor keys, the harmonic and melodic forms of the minor in 2 octaves. And then later on in sophomore year, they come back and they work on the 3-octave scales.
So this is in every key from E to E. Starting on 6, starting on 4, 5, starting on 4.
Starting. Yeah. Well, no. In this case, you know, we're starting in the key of C, the way the Segovia scales.
So it's going to be a third, fifth.
And we go around the circle of fifths. We go around the circle of fifths.
Very nice.
Adding 1 sharp at a time.
And it's all finger picking, or is it with a pick?
It's all classical style. It's all classical style. PIMA. And in fact, we also.
I'm sorry, do they have problems with their nails? I don't mean to interrupt because I'm really excited. I can't imagine teaching classical guitar in high school. It would have been a dream for me. Do they use nails, or do they use flesh, or what?
Many of the kids do. The ones who are more serious do. Some of them are a little less serious and choose not to. There's very few that choose not to. There are probably a few more than that say they're going to and try to, but don't have the self-discipline to take care of their nails, and so are always breaking them. Or doing dumb things that cause the nail to be broken, you know.
Like going up for wrestling or something.
Like going out for wrestling or worse, basketball.
Sure. You
know.
I could talk to you all day, but we got to keep this to somewhat of a reasonable number. I mean, it's fascinating. What's the total number of guitar students in your school, and also per class? What's the average number per class, total per school?
Okay. Well, the total, of course, can change from year to year based on how many kids audition. Right now, our numbers are low. COVID has put a real big dent on our annual audition. So we've had 2 years in a row where we've taken in very few. We've only taken in 6 new students in the department. Typically, I try to get 10 students in. Is my goal. The department is supposed to be capped at 35. So by taking 10 in through attrition, by the time they get to senior year, we've lost a few along the way. And so we can have our 35. But right now we're down around 24. So it's
still
very
pretty good.
low.
For a
Yeah.
classical program that's doing, that's not doing Justin Bieber stuff, that's still pretty good.
Right, and that's one of my criteria is that by the time they're finished with sophomore year, they better be ready for a college audition.
Interesting. You don't mean like, I mean, are you talking about like Juilliard College audition,
Well,
Manhattan School of Music, or just like,
they by the end of sophomore year, they should at least be able to audition for a university guitar department. Hopefully by the end of junior or senior year, they could audition for the conservatories. And
wow.
we have not yet gotten anybody into Juilliard, but along the way I've gotten several students into Manhattan School of Music, and some of the better university programs. I've had more students getting into Stetson University and Florida State University and University of Miami than you can shake a stick at. Of course, those are colleges that allow them to live in the same state as their parents, which makes their parents happy.
Yeah, money being what it is.
Yeah.
So, all right. So, I assume so I'm assuming one of the questions is, does the school provide instruments? But I'm betting that your students have their own instruments. If it's that serious.
They all have their own instruments, and in fact, many of the students in the department have 2 instruments, and they leave one in school and they have one at home. 2 classical instruments.
Right.
Honestly, a lot of those kids have 2 classical instruments, an acoustic, a couple of electric guitars at home. I mean, they're very immersed in guitar, and although we don't study any of the rock styles in the classroom, I don't discourage them. I encourage them to pursue that on their own, and even bring those materials in. We had a kid a few years ago who was a wonderful blues player, and in his senior year for the department concert, for the department fall concert, he put together a small blues band, and they did what did they do? They did a Jimi Hendrix tune. I don't even remember anymore which one it was, but they did one, and then for the spring concert, he put the same band together again, and they did The Thrill Is Gone.
I'm betting that your son could help him with shredding, right?
Yeah, my son is a shredder, and he could help him with that.
Yeah, that's going to be quick enough for any of the concertos that I've ever heard to be shredding.
Yeah.
So you've got multiple levels. I mean, so your principal set the curriculum out. So there must be, besides the 4 years, is there like a level 1, 2, 3, and 4? And are there formal, arbitrary? Like you have to do scales at 100 to get from freshman to sophomore and that kind of thing.
Yeah, the way, because they can't repeat a course with the same state course code, Department of Education course code, we have them, they are taking, quote, Guitar 1, which has that course code, as freshmen, Guitar 2 as sophomores, Guitar 3 as juniors, and Guitar 4 as seniors. Within that, I have certain expectations, minimum expectations, so that by the end of, by the end of freshman year, they should be able to really nail anything in the Royal Conservatory Series Guitar 3 book. By the end of sophomore year, they should be able to nail book 4, etc., right on up through senior year. That said, they very typically get way beyond that, way earlier than that, which is always encouraging.
It's really amazing. Let's see. So the next little bunch of questions are on style, but I think we've covered that. But maybe you could talk a little about ensemble versus solo. So the question is, what styles do you introduce? Do they read? Obviously, they read standard music notation, and that's all you do, and you introduce it early on. So 2 things. Do you split out ensemble techniques, ensemble skills, sight reading skills, and you drop a page of music and go like you would, and if you were sitting in a studio in Hollywood, or is it mostly, classical guitar, one staff and all that, and, separated into parts? I'm just curious.
Yeah, it's all separated into parts the way it would be in a string quartet, for example, and uh, I divide my time between standard repertoire, the standard classical guitar repertoire.
Solo,
So, these
solo.
kids are, so yes, they're solo repertoire. So
Yeah.
they spend some time, they're learning their Adelita and Lagrima and more advanced kids are learning, Asturias and really advanced music. I do require that they learn four, although I've downgraded that to three because the kids are picking harder and harder music. But I'm requiring that they do three pieces of solo repertoire per year from different periods of history. So they have to do a Baroque, they have to do a classical, and they have to do a romantic, or they can substitute a contemporary for one of those. But I do encourage them to do a Baroque. I usually really try to get them to do a Bach. Again, depending on the level of the kid, which Bach we choose. But the more advanced ones, by senior year, I'm hoping that they'll do one of the movements from one of the lute suites or from one of the cello suites.
Yeah, that's definitely second. Well, at Hart College in '70, that was a cello suite was minimum for me to stay as a guitar major. But still, to think about a high school kid being able to do that, it's just stunning. Just stunning.
Well, I'll tell you a funny anecdote. I had a kid several years ago. He had been a private student of mine before coming to Harrison, and he had been taking lessons since he was 8 or 10 years old. So in his freshman year, he was already quite advanced, and we had we periodically we do visiting artist things. And we had one particular visiting artist, and he wanted to get a private lesson with this visiting artist. And the artist was not really eager to listen to a high school kid.
Yeah.
But said, all right, you know what? I pay what for $200. If your parents could do $200, I'll give you, one period of the school day, 45 minutes, and that's going to be it. So I let them use the classroom, and they had at it. And end of the period, I came in, and they were working on the Bach Chaconne.
Okay.
And the artist who was giving the lesson said, "Can we have another couple of periods to work because we're really getting into this?"
That's a beautiful story. At Hart College, one afternoon, the announcements, the loudspeaker came on, and everybody was to hightail it down to Millard Auditorium because Rostropovich was in town. He happened to be coming between New York and Boston, so we stopped over at Hart College, and he was going to do a master class. So at the drop of a dime, they took 3 people. One was a classical pianist from Hart, one of the best ones, and he played, and then Rostropovich sat there and let him play through like 11 minutes of some Bach partita, and then Rostropovich said, "Very good, go practice." The next one was a keyboard player. I'm sorry, was a singer, and she was better. And so he let her sang, gave her a few pointers, and so she spent a little bit more of his time, invested a little more time. The third player was not from Hart at all. He was the fiance of the Hart concert mistress, a kid who was the principal chair of the Juilliard Orchestra. He came up here to get this. So the kid said, "Well, I'm going to play from a Brahms string quartet." So Rostropovich, I go ahead. So the kid started off within 3 notes. He stopped them. They spent 45 minutes on 2 measures.
Incredible.
Yeah, I never forgot that. 45 minutes on 2 measures.
Amazing.
Yeah, so that's what you just kind of talked about too.
Yeah. So, they can really, when you have a student who's that serious and has worked that hard and has natural gifts as well, because I'm a believer in 2 things: natural gifts and really hard work. And I don't think you can get far unless you have both of those things.
Sure. So where do you get your repertoire from? You already talked about the London Conservatory stuff. Where do you get all your other repertoire from? Just these are questions I got to ask.
Well, there's a lot of it that there's a few sources. There's the De Oz Publishing Company, which is
OZ?
based in Canada. D''OZ.
Oh, D apostrophe O Z.
D''OZ.
Okay.
They're based in Canada, and one of the reasons that I use their music, they've got some really good ensemble music. They've got quite a bit of ensemble music arranged for guitars or composed for guitar ensembles. And they have it as you can buy a download with a license to continue to reproduce it.
Oh, nice.
So you don't have to deal with lost
Right,
parts.
exactly. Yeah, no, it's very nice.
So that's one of my biggest suppliers of music. There are a couple of websites.
Sheetmusic.com or Sheet Music Plus or those things.
Yeah, well, there's Forrest guitar website, Forrest guitars. You do a search for it and you'd find it. And again, he has tons of solo music and guitar ensemble music that is free. It's either public domain or the arranger or composer has agreed to allow it to be downloaded for free. And so you can download those PDFs for free and use them any way you see fit. And those, and again, both of these publishers have a wide variety of ranges, and they let you know what level of difficulty to expect. So that way you're getting music that's appropriate for your ensemble.
You ever said that, did you ever have to Bill Swick about the NA small f SCME standards? And they published this quite impressive little PDF that says, here are 4 levels. Here's what you can expect in 4 levels, and I'll forward it to you. And I know people watching the video aren't going to be able to get it, but you can talk to Bill about it. Yeah, you know what it is and what it's about?
Yeah, I haven't seen it, so I'd like to take a look.
Yeah, I'll send it to you. Probably it overlaps and dovetails with your stuff really well.
I'm sure it does. Yeah.
So just say check. Your kids play open string chords. Check. And bar chords.
When you say open string, check.
Okay, so bar chords, so all open string chords. See,
so when you say open string, you're talking about the chords, first position C major, first position G7. Yeah, they do. So check on that one.
Okay, so on the bar chords, all the 5 cage system bar chords with starting in D mode cage and A and D and G and all of that. So all the bar forms. I'm just curious about that.
They wind up playing them
just coincidentally? Yeah.
Coincidentally with the music that they're studying.
Okay. Yeah. How about, so scales and technical exercises you covered. Did they learn guitar tab?
No.
Interesting. How about using the pick?
No.
Interesting. Did they learn to play by ear?
I encourage them to, and they get their ear training in their music theory class.
I wondered about that. They did ear training too. Yes, very good. Yeah, okay. Okay, we got that done. Last things are, public performances. Now, you've sent me a couple links, which I'm going to actually thread into the video, which is really nice as an intro and extra. Yeah, as long as you're okay with that, as long as it's not going to be, okay. What about public performances and recordings and things like that? Talk about that.
Yeah, public performances.
And leaving COVID aside.
Leaving COVID aside, public performances, there are 2 official department concerts per year, one in the fall, one in the spring. In addition to that, I do have an audition ensemble within the department who play other types of things, like, for example, right around holiday season in December, we have a music of the season where and that's a big moneymaker for the school, actually, and so that's a big deal. And
is that like that quartet you sent me the link to? Is that the quartet?
Yeah, actually, it's the quartet was something a little different, but it's actually the octet. You may have looked at the link and seen 1 or 2 of those videos had an octet. In fact, one of them that was at Stetson University, it looked like there were 12 kids there, but actually, if you look carefully, the back row were a separate quartet, and they weren't playing on this particular piece. It was this was the octet performing one particular piece of music. Cool. But that octet, it would be them. They're called Aeolian, and they'll typically play music of the season. We'll sometimes get calls from the community.
They have to go out and
provide us with music for a Christmas party.
Right, very nice.
And we'll say, okay, we want, we get a donation.
Hospitals, malls, and stuff like that, nursing homes and stuff too.
A lot of retirement
communities, very nice,
things like that.
Well, it is Florida after all.
It is exactly. And if it's a private party, and you know, if it's, we usually ask for some kind of an honorarium to the school,
Yeah.
and it goes to the department.
Mhm.
So the kids aren't walking away with money. We do get some of those though. If it's a private party, some guy's having his friends over and he wants background music, then we charge them, and the kids keep the money, because we want to teach them professionalism as well.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. This is so great. I am really bendy. Okay, so in summary, let's just wrap this up, because this has been a very, very informative session. And last question. Mostly what Bill wanted to do with these videos is to help initial first time in the classroom people who don't have your pedigree, don't have your skills, don't have your musicianship, and don't have a principal who could actually outline a guitar program for them, or would even know. So for people who aren't Bill Swick or aren't Dr. Phillips, what advice would you give them? What would you share with music educators who are starting off with a guitar program?
Okay, so first off, I would really look carefully at repertoire. There's a lot of repertoire out there that sounds good and is not all that difficult to play. So I'm going to assume that this particular teacher that we're profiling here doesn't have the kind of kids who are going to come in there and going to be working on a Bach prelude.
Right.
That's a little bit of a stretch, at least in the beginning. So choose repertoire carefully. And the reason I say that is because then the next thing you want to do is you want to make sure that you're using every opportunity to play it. If you don't have a principal who's real supportive, get a group of your students together and invite yourselves over to the principal's office to perform for them.
Interesting idea. Yeah.
Get him on your side.
Yeah.
Get him to buy into your program. Go out into the community. Look for opportunities for the kids to go out and play in public. And make sure the principal knows about that.
Do you try to establish a relationship with like television outlets or newspaper outlets so that they cover your programs?
We haven't done that. We do have good relationship with the local newspaper. Okay, and we've had several articles. Anytime we're doing something big, they do an article about us. So that's our big outlet there. The radio stations, there's a few country stations around here and a few Christian stations around here, but that's about it. They don't take much of an interest.
Christian is Christian rock. We know that. So yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of preaching too.
Oh, okay, yeah. But I meant
a lot of
music, you're not going to hear a Bach chorale. You're going to hear, Okay.
Yeah, right. So another piece of advice is to set the bar as high as you can. Mm-hmm. Give the kids the tools they need as best you can. Get out of their way.
Okay, tools they need.
Tools they need. This is the index finger, it's I. This is the thumb, it's P. Teach them the fingers, teach them, or if you're using a pick, teach them a correct pick grip. Mm-hmm. Teach them how to put their fingers correctly. But at some point, just step back and let them work independently. We have a lot of independent work going on in my classroom. We also have practice rooms right down the hall. We have quite a few practice rooms. So if I have a kid who's working on something and the classroom's a little too loud because I've got 10 kids playing at the same time, it's like, Dr. Phillips, I'm trying to really hear this and I can't. And I'm like, okay, here's the key, go to a practice room.
Sure.
And of course, you check on them every 15 or 20 minutes, make sure they are still in the practice room and not at Dunkin' Donuts down the street. But
I wasn't going to go there, but that's a fine rejoinder for public school teachers, or worse.
Yeah. Well, another former principal has said many times, our students our kids they are the best teenagers in the world, but they're still teenagers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.